Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 953rd New Social Environment. I'm Eleanor, a programs associate here at the Rail, and today I have the huge pleasure and privilege of being your MC for a conversation featuring Jeffrey Lependorf, Ryan Cook, Dara Barrois Dixon, and Cole Swensen. And we're also going to be lucky enough to hear readings from them today. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter, and here in New York, we're on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we're speaking from today. And now it's with great excitement that I will introduce today's guests and host. Jeffrey Lependorf is Executive Director of the Flowchart Foundation and also currently directs Art Omi Music International Musicians Residency, a program that he created for musicians from around the globe to collaborate with one another. A composer and musician himself, he is a master player of the shakuhachi Japanese bamboo flute, and his music has been performed all over the world and even in outer space. Ryan Cook is a Brooklyn-based genderqueer poet and performer, an MFA candidate in poetry at Columbia. They were awarded the Teaching Fellowship. Their work specializes in queer mythologies, digital cultures, and curses, and has been published or is forthcoming in Iterant, Tupelo Quarterly, the Poetry Project's Footnote series, and others. They also serve as a program associate at the Flowchart Foundation, an events host at McNally Jackson Bookstore, and an event manager for Future Poem Books. Born in New Orleans, Dara Barrois Dixon lives and works in Western Massachusetts. Her newest book is Tolstoy Killed Anna Karenina from Wave Books, and forthcoming in March 2024 is Extremely Expensive Mystical Experiences for Astronauts from Conduit. Other books include You Good Thing and Reverse Rapture. She founded and edits for Factory Hollow Press. Lannan, Guggenheim, National Foundation for the Arts, Massachusetts Cultural Council have all supported her writing. And then our host today is Cole Swensen. Cole is the author of 17 volumes of poetry and a collection of critical essays called Noise That Stays Noise. A book of hybrid poems, Art in Time, was published by Nightboat in 2021. A former Guggenheim Fellow, she has been a finalist for the National Book Award and has been awarded the Iowa Poetry Prize, among others. She also has translated over 20 volumes of poetry, prose, and art criticism from French and won the 2004 PEN USA Award in Literary Translation. I'm just so thrilled and happy to have you all here in conversation on the NSE today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Cole.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. Good to see everybody. This series is all about celebrating the people who behind the scenes actually make poetry happen in this country, but we're trying to overflow a little bit too, and had someone from the UK last time. And so we realized that poetry is a global thing, and we want to, again, celebrate the people who actually do the work to get it out there. So we're going to start with a couple readings just to get poetry in the air. So Ryan, why don't you take it away, and then we'll hear from Dara.
All righty. Hi, can everyone? All right, amazing. Hi, my name is Ryan. Thank you so much for having me. I think I wanted to start with another poet and then kind of put myself in conversation with this poet. Forgive me for my cheeks. I just had wisdom teeth surgery, so I'm reading one poem that feels like it mentions a chipmunk, partially this like. Anyway, but I think I'm going to start with this poem by Ahmed Amullah that now has a book out at Winter Editions called Border Wisdom. I just had the luxury of hearing Ahmed read a couple of weeks ago at the Winter Editions launch, and his work completely blew me away. And I highly recommend picking it up as soon as you can. I put the link in the chat. But this is The Disappearance by Ahmed Amullah. Chalky steps, chair hugging chair. Not long ago, all was well, and then one on top of the other, they've been stacked. Tables all smothered by stiff legs and some hard, flat bellies, and not much more happened after that. Everyone remained where they'd been placed. A strange arrangement that has just taken place. Without the sitters, they felt themselves kings for once, on top of the world, so to speak, and that was that, for a while, so they began feeling an itch for what used to be for the old times, when they were murdered every day and people sat there to witness. Thank you. I love this poem. I love Ahmed's work. I think that as a Palestinian poet and as a poet that deals a lot with space, it's so interesting to think about chairs and tables and wood as like something that can both create and mold, and also something that can burn and light. And I highly recommend checking out that book. So thank you. And then I'm going to read something that is a little bit of my own. And Eleanor, if you're okay with bringing up that, this is a poem that I've been writing. I've been writing a lot about cringe culture recently, and for people who are not as versed in cringe culture, it's something that's kind of going through a large transformation, linguistic transformation, so if you will, because it's something that started off as a physical response and then kind of got co-opted by internet speech to talk about something that is kind of less than savory or embarrassing or shameful for something else. And I think that poetry, as poets, there's a lot of things to be cringe about within poetry, and I think that cringe can also be like a way to absolve oneself and release oneself from some of the hardships or shame that goes around poetry. So I wanted to read this poem, kind of inspired by cringe culture, and kind of you'll hear about it. 10 reasons to be against list poems. In their quest to show music with an accumulation, they end up chipmunking. Images, places, ideas, actions. Too many nuts can mess with your tummy. 2. Cutting out syntax from a piece is cutting off its ability to breathe in time. 3. Grind culture. 4. Feels like a grocery list. 5. There was once a child who tried to list everything he saw throughout the day. 6. Parsnips, milk, 2%, sushi rice, Trader Joe's frozen chicken, tiki frozen dinner, frozen ham, cold cuts, oat milk, eggs, single person amount, sourdough, hummus, spring salad mix. 7. And he did so, each of the things began to think of each person, tree, car, kiss, crosswalk, gun, gate, hangnail, pencil, tire. 8. As equal and therefore equally banal, he began to cry at his discovery. He began to cry because there was nothing but lists of floors, buildings, the dead, happy and alive, showing influencers their local markets. 9. I began the day emailing Jay and asking to Zoom at 10:30 instead of 10, as I just woke up at 9:50 and wanted some time to get coffee. Only after to realize it was actually 8:30 and I had more than an hour and a half to kill. So I killed it by going back to bed, only to wake up at 10:25 and rush downstairs to get a cold brew before my meeting, cursing myself for getting so good at sleeping through. 10. Sirens, bird songs, burnt out beavers, punk alien melodies, marimba beats, mambo number 5, one body deserving more, a lover's Casio at the hourly aria, earthworms busting it down to heaven, Frankie's paw scratching, wounds welling, the skyline ripping apart. 1. Not only sleeping through, but snoozing them. I snooze everywhere. A. Bookstores, bodegas, bars that call themselves speakeasies, readings. Most of the time I snooze while awake, and it all comes out of me like A. Sirens, Muppets singing, Milky Way, kettle, sprinkles, unfold, valley, classic. A. Fully frontal and folding in on itself. 1. Neighboring chipmunk sought to cheer him up, but could not find the right words. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Dara, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Oh, great. Thanks everybody for being here. It's great. I love being here to listen to people talk about flowchart and various things that it's associated with, and to just be with you all. I'm gonna read 3 poems, one by W.S. Merwin, one by John Ashbery, and one by Bianca Stone. I know everybody probably knows sort of the first poetry reading they ever went to. And the first live living poet I ever saw read was W.S. Merwin. And it was 1967. And The Lice had just come out, which was his first really big book. And it was in a dark auditorium, which I recommend for all poetry readings. It's so nice to be in the dark. And there was even a light on the stage, so he was standing in this pool of light. And when he was a very young man, he was a very beautiful man too. And so it was quite an introduction to live poetry readings for me. And this was the poem that he read that never left my heart or soul from that early beginning. It's called For the Anniversary of My Death. And I'm sure many of you know it. Every year, without knowing it, I have passed the day when the last fires will wave to me, and the silence will set out, tireless traveler, like the beam of a lightless star. Then I will no longer find myself in life as in a strange garment, surprised at the earth and the love of one woman and the shamelessness of men. As today, riding after 3 days of rain, hearing the wrens sing and the falling cease, and bowing, not knowing to what. So that's one. And now another one I'm sure most of you are familiar with is the instruction manual, which I think is just the perfect poem to say to anyone, this is why you can love poetry. This is what it is. The instruction manual. As I sit looking out of a window of the building, I wish I did not have to write the instruction manual on the uses of a new metal. I look down into the street and see people, each walking with an inner peace, and envy them. They are so far away from me. Not one of them has to worry about getting out this manual on schedule. And as my way is, I begin to dream. Resting my elbows on the desk and leaning out of the window a little, of dim Guadalajara, city of rose-colored flowers, city I wanted most to see and most did not see in Mexico. But I fancy I see, under the press of having to write the instruction manual, your public square, city with its elaborate little bandstand. The band is playing Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov. Around stand the flower girls, handing out rose and lemon-colored flowers, each attractive in her rose and blue striped dress. Oh, such shades of rose and blue. And nearby is a little white booth where women in green serve you green and yellow fruit. The couples are parading. Everyone is in a holiday mood. First, leading the parade is a dapper fellow clothed in deep blue. On his head sits a white hat, and he wears a mustache, which has been trimmed for the occasion. His dear one, his wife, is young and pretty. Her shawl is rose, pink, and white. Her slippers are patent leather in the American fashion, and she carries a fan, for she is modest and does not want the crowd to see her face too often. But everybody is so busy with his wife or loved one, I doubt they would notice the mustachioed man's wife. Here come the boys. They are skipping and throwing little things on the sidewalk, which is made of gray tile. They are skipping. One of them, a little older, has a toothpick in his teeth. He is silenter than the rest and affects not to notice the pretty young girls in white. But his friends notice them and shout their jeers at the laughing girl. Yet soon all this will cease with the deepening of their years, and love bring each to the parade grounds for another reason. But I have lost sight of the young fellow with the toothpick. Wait, there he is on the other side of the bandstand, secluded from his friends, in earnest talk with a young girl of 14 or 15. I try to hear what they are saying, but it seems they're just mumbling something, shy words of love, probably. She is slightly taller than he and looks quietly down into his sincere eyes. She is wearing white. The breeze ruffles her long, fine black hair against her olive cheek. Obviously, she is in love. The boy, the young boy with the toothpick, he is in love too. His eyes show it. Turning from this couple, I see there is an intermission in the concert. The paraders are resting and sipping drinks from straws. The drinks are dispensed from a large glass crock by a lady in dark blue. And the musicians mingle among them in their creamy white uniforms and talk about the weather, perhaps, or how their kids are doing at school. Let us take this opportunity to tiptoe into one of the side streets. Here you may see one of those white houses with green trim that are so popular here. Look, I told you, it is cool and dim inside, but the patio is sunny. An old woman in gray sits there fanning herself with a palm leaf fan. She welcomes us to her patio and offers us a cooling drink. My son is in Mexico, she says. Mexico City. He would welcome you too if he were here, but his job is with a bank there. Look, here's a photograph of him. And a dark-skinned lad with pearly teeth grins out at us from the worn leather frame. We thank her for her hospitality, for it is getting late, and we must catch a view of the city before we leave from a good high place. That church tower will do, the faded pink one. There, against the fierce blue of the sky, slowly we enter. The caretaker, an old man dressed in brown and gray, asks us how long we have been in the city and how we like it here. His daughter is scrubbing the steps. She nods to us as we pass into the tower. Soon we have reached the top, and the whole network of the city extends before us. There is the rich quarter with its houses of pink and white and its crumbling leafy terraces. There is the poorer quarter, its homes a deep blue. There is the market where men are selling hats and swatting flies. And there's the public library painted several shades of pale green and beige. Look, there is the square we just came from with the promenaders. There are fewer of them now that the heat of the day has increased. But the young boy and girl still lurk in the shadows of the bandstand. And there is the home of the little old lady. She is still sitting in the patio fanning herself. How limited, but how complete has been our experience of Guadalajara. We have seen young love, married love, and the love of an aged mother for her son. We have heard the music, tasted the drinks, and looked at colored houses. What more is there to do except stay? And that we cannot do. And as the last breeze freshens the top of the weathered old tower, I turn my gaze back to the instruction manual, which has made me dream of Guadalajara. I love all the colors in that poem. And the last poem is by Bianca Stone. And it was back in April, first published in the New Yorker. What's poetry like? Poets play the winter tarantella, making love in midnight hours on a white iron bed like a dog skeleton, distinguishing the essential and unessential moment, shared between ordinary lunatics and screaming over a bird in an apple tree until an elegy has to be written to resuscitate the relation. Those who look towards the depleted wildlife of neighborhoods with tragic relish to see somehow ourselves disappearing about ourselves. Once in New York City years ago, the internet technician finally arrived. His teenage apprentice stood in my living room over a Transtromer book. He said it looked kind of cool, and he wanted to know, what is it? Poetry, I said. What's poetry like? He asked. And the treacherous inadequacy with which one finds oneself explaining in a few loose, deficient words, something with lungs and no face, the immortal freak of language you haunt and hunt, which is the original state of language you're trying to get back to from within. Poetry. whose rare geniuses come as bittersweet suicidal explosions on the tongue, randomly felt during long, tedious meals, award-winning and already forgotten, all the emoting of the unanalyzable fragments, all the surrender and denotations of precision and reckless insight in reference to hidden wisdom and Coke cans, conversations across time and slips into truth and obscurity of thought altogether blissfully, the form itself at its best, strings of dreams in the waking life, overlaid like unobserved clothing, the words that sing stillness, the silence craved by perpetual auctioneers, that which is not the tale of an event, but itself an event. You know what? I said, just take the book, pushing it into his hands. Thanks, he said, and took it away, grinning a little. But later, with snow in my head and a thunder in my right eyelid, I was worried, as I was so dangerously then, about dark yet unspoken things. It frightened me, that shiny black and white book wafting around New York City in the back of a Time Warner cable van, waiting to be opened, waiting to torment him, thinking of it changing his life. Thank you all. It was nice to get to read those poems.
And wonderful to hear them. Wonderful to hear from you both. Thanks for starting us out with poetry. And now I think we have some images. Do you want to show us some pretty pictures, Jeffrey, and go from there?
Sure. First, thanks for having us, Cole. This is such a remarkable series, and it's such a joy to be a part of it. Oh, look, it's flowchart. So I'm going to talk through these briefly, and we can go back, and we don't have to look at them again, but we can talk through some of these things. So there on the left is our building. The Flowchart Foundation occupies most of the second floor there, which is the Ashbury Resource Center. And on the first floor on the right, that storefront space is the flowchart space. And on the right, you get a nice view of the main drag through Hudson. And I should say that we here in Hudson, that's where I am too, are on unceded land of the Mohican and Onondaga tribes. And we're very fortunate to enjoy this land today. So important to acknowledge that. Here you see a few little views of that second floor. I wish I could really just show the whole thing. We're in the midst of sort of restructuring the spaces up there. So you're not really even seeing the main ARC, Ashbury Resource Center space, but here you get just a tiny glimpse of how much stuff we have. And I should say that we have even more in the basement. So as much as we have cataloged, and there's an online catalog where you can look up books that have been cataloged and journals, we have so much more, thousands of photographs, recordings, artworks, on and on. We can go to the next slide. I took a couple of quick pictures just so you see some of the fun things we have. This is probably goes without saying, a portrait, a sculpture of John Ashbery that was made by Nikki de Saint-Phal. This is when she was married to Harry Matthews, and many probably know that Harry was very important, close to John, and together with Kenneth Koch, they put out the short-lived but seminal journal Locus Solis. We can go to the next one. You see some other toys around there and some ceramics. I just pulled a few quickie things from the many flat files. On the bottom there, you see one of many collaborative artist books. This one with gorgeous, it's a setting of Description of a Mask, which is a prose poem from A Wave from 1984, I think. And on the left, you see one of the many beautiful woodblock prints that are throughout this very large volume. And on top there, on the upper left, is a little painting on wood painted for John by Jean Elion, a favorite painter of his, and we have a few things. Below that, a little collage by Pierre Martory, a French poet who he also translated a number of times. And then on the right, something I think surprising, an actual piece of art by John, a print. So we can go to the next slide. And then below the Ashbury Resource Center, which we'll talk more about later, I should say that we're two arms at the Flowchart Foundation, and if I may mix you a metaphor, the heart of Flowchart is the Ashbury Resource Center, and then of course we do lots of public programming. In our own space, the Flowchart space, you see here one snapshot from this summer's gathering event, something we've done a couple of times now. We call gatherings what some people might call a symposium, but unlike a regular symposium, in addition to papers and other kinds of readings, we had performances of all kinds, music, film, dance, hybrid readings, went on for 2 days with a whole night of performance. You see Paulo Javier there on the right giving a talk. We can go to the next one and zip through these. Here's an example of the flowchart space again. This was an event with Ann Lauterbach, and I pulled this because it's there with Charlie Schulz, who many know is managing editor of the Brooklyn Rail, so I thought that'd be fun to see. And in the background, you see a little bit of an exhibit, the first exhibit we had in the space. As a gallery space, we're featuring art that somehow engages language. And we kicked off with these remarkable woodcuts by the master woodcut artist Antonio Frasconi. So much of his work involved poetry, so we were able to feature some of that work. We can go to the next slide. And here, a recent event, we just, thank you, New York State Council on the Arts Capital support, we just became fully ADA accessible. And this event had been planned long before, it was coincidental, but it was delightful that our first event in our newly fully ADA accessible space was a discussion of Larry Agner. And you see there Charles Bernstein on the left and Jennifer Bartlett on the right. And in the background, a little glimpse, one of the treasures we have many collections of things in the Ashbury Resource Center, which is both a special collection library and a repository of archival things. We have a number of John Ashbury's collage materials, including a large set of antique game boards that he would have photographed and reproduced them at different sizes sometimes, and other elements to make collages out of. So we, based on a suggestion from Susan B., I want to give credit, we handed out a bunch of materials to a number of other artists and poets and had them make new Ashbury collages. And we auctioned them off to help support us. So you see some of them in the background. Okay, we can go on. Here's the space again as an exhibit space, and this is an exhibit that's up now, so come up and visit. It's up through the end of January, of paintings and artist books by Marjorie Wellish. You can see her there on the right. This is with just some folks mingling around this space during the opening. And there are a number of events with that. We also do a lot of events with others. We do an annual Night of Neo Benchi, Flowchart Cabaret Cinema at the Hudson Opera House, which we're right across the street from, just a couple doors away. On the top there, you can see one of the performers, Alex Patrick Dyke, doing a Neo Benchi. Probably most everyone here knows what that is. It's kind of poet's theater, where you remove the sound or dialogue, at least from a film clip, and then a poet creates new dialogue to perform live in front of the screen. And that's a sold out event we do every year, and it's really, really fun. So let's move on. We also, at the start of the pandemic, which is when we were really just about to open our space in March of 2020, and then of course couldn't for quite a while, we had to think of things to do. So of course we launched online programming, as we're experiencing right now as participants, but we wanted to do other things too. And the beer garden across the street, Back Bar, had put up this yurt. I know it looks like a teepee, but it's a yurt. I'm careful to say. It's a Norwegian tent. And what we saw of this big canvas tent was a blank canvas. So the wonderful folks at the Opera House lent us their very high-end digital projector, and we started projecting animations of poems onto this tent at night. We started with some pandemic poems that were written by a group in Prague, a performance and poetry group called Object Paradise. We had become Facebook friends, our orgs, and we also sent them things that they projected onto a square in Prague. And we ran these poems. They were in English, but from Czech poets, which was really fun. Right after this, we also presented haiku poems that came out of Workers' Writers' School, written by frontline low-wage pandemic workers. That was amazing to run. And the tent sadly has come down, but we've done, you'll see one other picture coming up. We've done other projections on other things. We still call it Tentacle. That's the name for the series still, even though there's no more tent. We can go on. Here's an example. We do various window installations. This is part of an installation of a collaboration we did with a really fantastic organization here in Hudson, Oral History Summer School. Oh, the word school's left out, that's my fault. It was Oral History Summer School. And this was a project they initiated working with youth in Hudson. You can see photos of some of them on the left there, where they were introduced to oral histories that were recorded from Hudson residents. And they worked with transcriptions of these oral histories and made what they call blackout poems. We might call them erasures. You see some of them on the right there in the window out of these poems. You can't hear it because this is a still photo, but above the door was a sound bar playing the actual oral histories. And scrolling on that LED screen on the left there, we had the cutout poems, the results that the youth came up with. And we can move on. And here's an example, the other part of that installation, another tentacle projection, but not on a tent. We projected during the annual winter walk here, happens every December. We made an animation of lines from the blackout poems that had been created out of the oral histories. So it was just wonderful transition from oral history to physical poem to projected text here that people got to read as they walked by. And continuing on, we also put poems, this is something else we started during the pandemic. We put poems in the waiting room of the train station, and we still do that. There are large glass vitrines in the waiting room. They're about 33 by 33, and we feature one press at a time. Usually this is one example from when we did New Directions. Toad Lily Press is up now, and we'll have another press soon. And they stay up for 2-3 months, and that's just been nice to be able to do. We covered the Opera House in giant printouts when the pandemic started of some text from Ashbery's The Rehearsal from 3 poems. As we said, we unsilenced the Opera House, which had of course, to be shut down during the pandemic. Continuing on. And we do lots and lots of online programming. We launched a series at the start of the pandemic. It's still going very strong. It's become kind of a signature program. These are the ones coming up starting in January. Called Close Readings in a Virtual Space. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. And it's very much indicative of the kind of programming we do. And there's one final slide of a program coming up next week. We'll be zooming live from Alice Notley's Paris apartment, which will be great fun. Her and Nick Storm Alice will be reading from her new collection of essays, and then Nick and Alice will have a discussion. He's there with her right now, helping her put her papers together. And so I think we'll get a little glimpse of the apartment. That'll be fun too. So that's enough of the slides, so stay tuned for that. A whirlwind tour.
Yeah, but a really informative one, and shows us your great range, which seems like one of the most exciting things about the foundation is just its reach. But Dara, knowing that you were there at the very beginning, could you tell us about how the foundation emerged and who else was involved and et cetera? Oh, you're muted.
There.
Yep.
All right. So I think that behind a lot of it, there was always John Ashbery, an annotated bibliography put together by David Kermani. And it was a slightly unconventional bibliography because especially it included all of the annotated mentions of his art writing, which was so valuable to later researchers who could view through his art writing some of his processes in verbal writing, writing his poems. And so it's also, I think one of my favorite things about books of any kind is if they have a really good index. And that might go with Ryan's list poems, but I love the index of this book and the value of this book it was made in the mid-70s, but today it's still so valuable. And the keeping of a bibliography of Ashbery's work has been moved into the website and the Ashbery Research Center work. And it's an ongoing project, like so many of them are there. And one of the things that probably got it started was John and David and James Tate and me talking a lot about houses and spaces, and how houses and spaces showed so much about a writer's way of keeping space in their heads and putting things in those spaces in their heads, a little bit like those memory palaces from older times, where you build a space to put ideas or facts that you don't want to lose. And I think that flowchart began out of talks about those kind of things. And it really, in my part in it, was really just being very, very happy and grateful that David would then run with a lot of that and turn it into something real, which is flowchart. And then he gathered many, many other people to be a part of it. And it then went along for pretty many years, but now it's got a new life. And the new life is what you're seeing today. And it's really exciting to see all the things that are coming out of it and into it. So it's been a wonderful thing.
Great, thank you. You being one of the oldest members of this, the founding member of it, I'd like to now turn to the, I think, newest member of the team, Ryan. And if you would tell us, what are your impressions? You're seeing both from the outside and the inside in a certain way, and you're a different generation. What's it mean to your generation? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, thank you so much. I started off with the flowchart, actually attending the marathon and presenting a piece kind of about the genderqueer and trans viewing of the New York school with the help of Ty, who's in the chat. Hi, Ty. Talking about just about how the New York school can kind of hold space for different expressions of gender and queerness. And this space that kind of existed where we were all presenting, you know, I took the Hudson train up, and it felt, I mean, I fell in love with the space itself and with Hudson. And I think seeing that that it can both be a space in which presentations and performances and galleries can happen, as well as this connected archival limb, so to speak, next to it, really excited me, because I feel like they go hand in hand with a lot of poetry. I feel like poetry is just as exciting performance-wise as it is like archivally, when we collect things and preserve things and hold on to things. So it's also a matter of like giving people things, and like Bianca's poem talking about like giving away these poetry books just as much as we're presenting them or reading them aloud. And I think that's what really excited me the most, was this like sort of multifaceted approach to John Ashbery and the New York School sort of legacy. Was it's not just something that we're just gonna, you know, have our little celebration of these people, but we're also giving back in a sort of way by hosting performances and people who have been inspired by them to create a sort of like lineage post New York School in a way. So that's what really excited me. And then as soon as I joined on the team, it became like a totally different level of excitement. Like here I was, I come from an event hosting background, but now I'm suddenly also trying programming, trying out marketing, hanging up collages by some of my favorite poets and artists. So it feels like each and every day there's this new surprise of what I get to do and how I get to communicate with the team. So that's what really excites me the most.
Great. It sounds really exciting indeed. That's great. Jeffrey, would you tell us about the Resource Center, the Ashbery Resource Center, what that contains, who uses it, what kind of work people are doing?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So there's so much there. As Dara said, it started out from David Kamani. For those who may not know, David Kamani, of course, was Ashbery's husband. And it's his building that we are very, very grateful to be in. The flowchart space itself on the first floor, I want to say, was years ago David Kamani's Persian carpet store. And in fact, if you see an exhibit in the gallery or come for a program there, in the very back, we've left a few wonderful items from back when it was David's shop. There are some antique Turkish carpet beaters and things like that. We call them the carpet remnants in the back. But the resource center upstairs really is the bulk of what takes up our space in the building. And there's just so much there. In addition to books and journals and things you might expect, broadsides and posters, things like that. As Dara was saying, the initial project focused a lot on what we refer to as Ashbery's created spaces. He's always thought of as an ekphrastic poet, but that means so much more than someone who's interested in painting, and is in dialogue with visual arts. His physical environment directly informed his work, and so much of his work is in dialogue with not only the things around him, but even the music he's listening to. He always listened to music while writing, for example, and we have some 4,000 LPs. We have them all there, so you can actually examine some very obscure and some less, but mostly obscure classical works and avant-garde works and other things that he was listening to while writing, and find those connections. We have a large collection of VHS tapes that he had taped assistants. He would ask them to record things from television. Most of it is Turner Classic Movies or some other things. And again, that's a dissertation waiting to happen, or inspiration for other poets and artists to examine what he's watching, quite frankly, and how that informed his poetry. We have some 5,000 photographs that go back. It's a remarkable record, not only of John and his life and friends in the New York School, but it goes back generations. We even have daguerreotypes and tintypes. It's a remarkable record of a New York farm family. So even if John didn't exist, it would be a remarkable collection in and of itself. We have an incredible collection of artwork. Everything from, well, of course, we're named for Flowchart, that John's book-length book there, and I'm holding it to not get the glare, if we can see it. But the cover, of course, by Trevor Wingfield, who we worked with a lot. We have a lot of the original paste-ups of John's covers for his books. He was very involved with every book. It wasn't left to the publisher entirely. He carefully ordered the poems and carefully worked with artists on the images and selected images. So we have that work there as well. And you can see things in manuscript form. We have, oh gosh, so much stuff. Everything from a scrapbook he kept when he lived in Paris that has recipes in it he would cut out of French newspapers and American language newspapers. He loved to cook. We have all of his cookware. So we have everything from things with direct dialogic connection to his poetry to things that just have remarkable aura. I don't think examining a big copper cooking pot might reveal anything about a poem, but holding it is wonderful. We have a collection of fish-shaped aspic molds that John had. We have lots of collections of things. We have a big collection of tiny shoes, little ceramic, and they're matchstick lighters and all kinds of little shoes that it's just wonderful. And all kinds of ceramics, all sorts of sets of dishes, many with pictures on them that probably do show up in poems. A couple we know do. They're French rebus plates and some rare things. I could just go on and on and on. As well as, of course, the many collaborative artist books that are gorgeous, in limited editions, and many books written, of course, by him and about him, but also it expands out. We think of it as a kind of three-dimensional, rhizomatic collection. John's there at the center, but it's more about what goes out from him. So it's a place where one can zero in on Ashbery and get really deep into Ashbery studies, but it's also a generative space where one can, for example, he collaborated with many composers. One can pull out a score, a Ned Rorem score, an Elliott Carter, a book, and find out about the people that he worked with as well. To give an idea of what goes on there, though, we of course have scholars come in and do work, and there are a number of scholarly tomes that reference us and found things in the collection. But we also want it to be a place where anyone can come and just enjoy the aura of these fantastic things. You saw images of a couple things, but there are toys. There's just so many fun, wonderful things, shoes, mugs, everything. But we also want it to be a space where artists will come, where poets will come and engage with the work, either directly involved with it, or in fact, just to be in the space and be inspired amongst this great stuff. To give one example, over the next couple of months, the artist Richard Kraft will be spending time in this space, photographing objects and things, and developing new artwork in dialogue with some of the treasures we have, and he'll be creating a set of artworks based on what's in the collection, and we'll see what he comes up with. And I hope that'll be the first of many like that. And we do occasionally also exhibit things downstairs in our own gallery space, so we can have exhibits of things from the collection as well. That's a quick overview.
It sounds amazing. I want to come visit.
It is. Everyone, and anyone's welcome to come and visit. Just get in touch, and love to show it off. There's a lot of fun stuff.
Sounds it. I'm thinking about the name. I know it's not a foundation in a traditional way, and maybe, Dara, you must have been there when the name was invented. How did it come about?
David and John did that work.
Okay.
And I think that nothing could have been a better name for what was then, considered to be something that needed to exist. And
Yeah.
the beauty of Flowchart's name is perfect for something.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that it's flow chart, not flowchart. As I like to say, a flowchart is a very useful diagram. Flow chart is a book-length poem by John Ashbery. But I also want to point out, since you've asked, I get to say it, Flowchart Foundation, we're a foundation really in alliteration only. As much as I wish we had a big endowment and could make grants, we don't. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, like most of the folks you have featured, and we have to scrounge for every penny. Would love to have anyone's support who's watching today. And many of you already are, I know, in fact. But we are particularly trying to raise funds right now to do a lot more with the Ashbery Resource Center in particular. We were able to get initial support for the public programming because we were doing it, and the place was closed. But now that it's opened up again and we're rearranging things, and we've had our first NEH grant and are seeking other funding, we have a fantastic archivist, Nina Boots-Karas. By the way, Nina, Ryan, and I make up the staff. We're it. I'm the only full-time person, and Ryan and Nina are both part-time. I wish we could have them full-time, and we're trying to raise funds to do that. We want to get Ryan up here in Hudson too. Nina's up here. And there's just so much to do and so much fun stuff. We rely heavily on a number of wonderful volunteers, the board being at the core of that. I'm so glad Dara's here. Dara has done so much to help in so many ways, has been involved in programs and helped me identify poets and reach them. I'm not a poet, I'm just a guy that likes it. And I know a lot of poets from having worked in publishing for years, small press publishing, but I know who I know. And so the board has been wonderful in helping my outreach. And Ryan, now, by the way, I want to say we're so proud of Ryan. Their bio said that they were an MFA candidate, but in fact, since that bio went online, I'm embarrassing Ryan. Ryan is now, I think we can say, a master of fine arts of poetry. So it's now mastered poetry. So congratulations, Ryan.
Geez.
Yeah. But Ryan's also now been involved in programming, and Ryan has outreach to poets that, I can't know, because we can't all know everybody. So that's been fantastic. In that next series of close readings, we have some poets that Ryan has brought in that I might not have known about. So it's really, really great. And we'll be doing more programming. And Brandon Downing, some of you may know, wonderful poet and also artist, was also one of our collage artists. And by the way, as was Rachel Blau-Duplessis, who's here on the Zoom, I see a great collage for the auction. But Brandon curated a summer series we had at an outdoor beer garden, another one in the area here over the summer. That was a lot of fun. So we get out there, we do things inside. And I've lost track of your question entirely, but it was about foundation. So yeah, we need to raise the money, sadly, but it's just really a wonderful alliteration from this book that we love, and it's what's written here in Hudson, by the way, too. And in fact, one of the many little treasures in the collection is the typewriter that John typed Flowchart on.
Right, nice. And I've always loved that title because both words can be either verbs or nouns. So just seems to be.
I'm so glad you pointed that out. We've done 2 slow reads through Ashbery books. I'm sure we'll do more, where we post a page or 2 every day. And then folks can read along as they like at their leisure. It happened through social media. And then someone will lead a talk. The talk through Flowchart was led by Emily Skillings, wonderful poet, also on our board, who was also an assistant to John for a while. And every day, Emily would post a kind of journal entry of her reading of the section of the day. It's all online. You can find it all on our website, by the way. But part of the discussion, and then we did a Zoom discussion like this at the end. And we spent some time talking about flow chart and and it's so Ashbury that everything in this simple title can mean so many things. And the question isn't, and I think this gets to the core of what our programming is about and what the organization is about. The question isn't what is it supposed to mean or what does it mean? It's what can it mean? How does it mean? And with Ashbury, it's never, well, I like to say this is to be silly, but with Ashbury, the glass is never half full or half empty. It's always both. The fact is, in real life, it's always both. But for most of us, it's half empty or half full. And part of the magic of Ashbury is that he's able to keep them both present. So it doesn't mean A or B, it means A and B, and it probably also means C and D and E and G and H. So that's part of the beauty of the poetry. And just if I can say a little bit about one of our programs, the close readings, that came about not only the pandemic, but from friends of mine who are not poets, but are, you know, readers and have maybe tried to read an Ashbury poem or two, but have never had a class, saying to me, you know, I've tried to read an Ashbury poem. I don't get it. I don't know what it's supposed to mean. Are you going to offer classes explaining Ashbury? And my immediate answer was, no, we will never do that. That's, of course, the wrong approach. It's not about explaining it. I think half of it is giving permission to be confused. I think that's okay. But we would come up with something else. And so, because I, as a non-poet who likes it, and who's never had a class in contemporary poetry, you know, I just read the stuff. And I may be wrong, and that doesn't bother me. I just like it. I know what I get out of it. So we started these close readings in a virtual space. I almost regret we call them close readings because they really aren't close readings in the traditional sense. We don't go word by word by word. My husband, the scholar Eric Keenahan, give him a shout out, gave me a word that it was too late. We had already done a few of them that I like better, but they're really slow readings. It's really just taking time. And so we invite favorite poets, Cole, you've of course done one, to pick just one or two, you know, small, we say challenging poems, and challenging doesn't mean necessarily hard. It just means resonant and a poem we can spend time talking about. And we spend an hour not with the guest poet teaching the poem, and that can be really hard for some of the guest poets. We spend a lot of time beforehand talking about not teaching the poem, but acting as a kind of tour guide and being there to ask some questions, give some prompts, and to just let everyone in the room chat about the poem. And we've now done, I don't know, 50 or so of them, and they've just been amazing. I learned so much with each one, and they're not about solving the poem or closing it. They're about opening it up, and people might be wrong. I don't know. I don't care. It's just about generating what this poem might mean, how it means to each of us. And it's created this amazing non-hierarchical space, and that non-hierarchical approach, non-school way of learning is so much a part of what we do. And I think it also reflects the generosity of Ashbury's poetry, which he would refuse to explain for good reason, because as soon as you explain it, that's what it means. And it might mean that, and probably does mean that, but it also can mean so much else and can mean something else to you that might be only to you, and it's equally valid. And we've had famous poets who are regulars in the close readings chats, along with people that have said, I've never had a class, can I say something? And we say, of course, and they say something wonderful. And we get discussions, and I don't think anyone's ever felt that they can't speak in these sessions. And I've heard now from a number of teachers that said they've used them in the classroom. We've had whole classes show up, by the way, for some of them. And it's just been a joy. And when a poet says, oh, what poem should I do? I say, you know, look over what we've done and pick something that doesn't fit. And so they've run the gamut. And we've done everything from a medieval poem up to, you know, living poets now, and everything in between. I think, Cole, you had done HD, which was great. And Dara, you did one of
Marianne Moore.
Marianne Moore, yeah, of course. And Rachel did Charles Olson, and I see other. I'm not going to go through the whole list. There are other people that have done them on the chat here, but it's been wonderful getting the gamut of different kinds of poetries and poets.
And the great thing, well, sorry, no, you can go.
Go ahead, Dara, and then we'll hear from her.
Just a little thing. I was looking at different things on the Flowchart website yesterday, and I hadn't looked at in a long time John's acceptance speech of a Lifetime Achievement Award at the National Book Award ceremony in 2011, I think, maybe. And I listened to it and last night, and it's such a perfect introduction to him in terms of his love and attitude, his humor, his kind of always having a little bit of an imp of the perverse inside that's fun. And it's a really beautiful, short, sweet speech that I really recommend to everybody. If you go look at that website, it's right on top almost. You just start to go down in the ARC part, and it's beautiful. That's all.
Thanks. That sounds like a good thing to go to.
It
And-
Well,
As you said-
sorry. I think that it makes it leads wonderfully into what I was going to talk about. It's just the sheer amount of stuff that is available online for the flowchart. I mean, Jeffrey just mentioned so many of the close readings that when I first started this job, I had the luxury of like sifting through and going back and listening to all of them, because it was a completely different resource to me and to anyone. It's not like there's no paywall. If you have someone who's like really interested in a poem or a poet reading a certain poem, you could send it to your friend and be like, hey, here's an hour long or under an hour long sort of close reading of this poem you like. And I think that that's kind of beautiful, because a lot of foundations and other places are kind of based behind a wall of barrier to entry or other types of things. And to have videos kind of exist from this necessity during the pandemic and kind of exist and continue to remain after, it's just really I don't know, it gives me joy to like think about the amount of space and the amount of videos and documents that exist on the website there. So,
And I'm going to add, I'm so glad you brought up that National Book Award speech, Dara, which I had the great pleasure of being present for.
Oh, lucky.
It's wonderful. It's just so short and friendly, and it is actually, it's a call for the wonderfulness of difficulty.
Yep.
And how we shouldn't be afraid of it, you know.
Right.
It's anyway, so yeah, you should all go there. And there's so many other great things on the website, as Ryan was saying. If you go to the Ashbury Resource Center part of the website, there's a whole library of all the close readings, but the Ashbury Resource Center part has some special features. We've put up things, you know, if we put up everything we could find, you'd be scrolling forever. We put up just a very small collection of things that can't be found elsewhere, that are sort of written for us. We're actually just about to add a piece by Rachel Glau-Duplessis, who's here. We're doing a little final edit on it. It's going to go up probably later today. Wonderful essay about collage and John Ashbery. But you'll find some wonderful things there. And also, even if you click on Ashbery's awards and honors, you can see the cookie he received from the Raymond Roussel Society when they honored him. And you actually get to see all these things. It's not just a list of awards. So we're trying to really add other fun, engaging things like that. I'm sure at some point we'll do a feature around eating with John, because he had quite a cookbook collection, and I have, you know, images of all the covers, and some of them are just amazing. Some of these rare, you know, French and love to cook from around the world. We have great covers of those, and the cookware, and things from the recipe box and his scrapbook, which one might also consider where his collage impulse began. There are places in this scrapbook where the way the recipes or collage seems to be less about the recipes than what they look like. So that's fun too. Anyway, I could go on and on about what we have in the Resource Center, but I hope people will keep making use of it, and we'll keep adding more and more online. Right now, the searchable online catalog is only the things in print that we have archived. We're working now on finding ways to make available through the online search objects and images as well. So of course, we start off as a traditional archive, and we now have much of the contents of Ashbury's Hudson Home. We put up earlier a link to the Ashbury's Nest. You can Google to find a remarkable virtual tour through the house put together by his biographer, Karen Rothman, through the folks at Yale. Quite a lot of programming. It was a big, expensive project that we didn't actually fund. We just get to give entree to it through the website. But you can move through the house and click on objects and hear Ashbury read poems related to them, and then click again and hear a talk about Japanese printmaking. And it just keeps going deeper and deeper. And we have so many of the things you see on that tour we have at the Resource Center. All the artworks that went up from the first floor to the second floor in that staircase, for example, which in a previous exhibit we recreated on the wall downstairs on a diagonal. So it looked like the staircase. That was great fun. And so much more like that. So there's, and again, many, many boxes we have yet to open. Who knows what we'll discover. It's not that infrequent that we open up a book and a letter falls out or a drawing by someone important. We recently opened a book and a letter from Rod McEwen to John fell out with wonderful things in it. And, you know, drawings by Alex Katz and Larry Rivers have fallen out of things. So I'm sure we'll find more as we go. So if you come and visit, you too may find a treasure in the collection.
Sorry, Dara.
Hmm.
Well, I was just going to ask a little bit about the website. It sounds like an amazing resource, and I've wandered around it myself quite a bit and have found and I've wondered who puts it together and who maintains it.
Well, I guess it's mostly me, and now Ryan is helping. And if anyone finds errors, let me know. I do my best. There was an original website that I refer to as the oldie website, like all websites that go out of date, that had been created back when it was an archival project at Bard originally, and it was a static website. It had a list of some resources, you know, how to teach Ashbury, introduction to Ashbury, and this little searchable catalog. And so I took all of that, made a new website, and then have just kept adding things as we go. And we've done now so many virtual programs, and the videos of pretty much all of them are there, that it's become quite an archive of programming. And we keep, as I said, trying to add more and more curations through the collection as we can. And this is really, you know, as we have more support and men and women and everything power to keep, you know, to go through the materials, because we feel the real power of it is there are amazing things there, but the real power of the collection is how one can make connections between them.
Yeah.
You know, like Ashbury's poetry itself, you know, the magic happens in the line breaks, maybe, or in the juxtapositions, right? So that's the collection. And so you move through it, you can look up a book, but it's what else is near it is the magic. And so we want to create more and more curations like that, and we'll be doing that. So as we move forward and, you know, raise more money and have more people working in it to do some of that, there's a wonderful class right now. I'm going to see a presentation next week. Elizabeth Joyce, wonderful Ashbury scholar, New York School scholar, has been working with some grad students in library science and literature, and we gave them our data set, and they've been playing with it, and we're going to see what they've come up with next week. And it may then appear back on our website, where they've been coming up with, we talked about all our wish list of things, and we'll see what they were able to come up with toward new ways that we might make connections between things in the collection, or even finding things in it available digitally. Because originally, of course, you saw David's book. Of course, when that was written, anyone's assumption was you could always go and buy the book. And of course, it ended at the point that the book was published, right? And John wrote much, much, much more stuff. Yeah, Dara's holding it up. John had not yet even run the Triple Crown, as we say at that point, yet, when the book came out. It's just that David already knew it was going to be important and put this bibliography together. And it's remarkable, the detail of footnoting on this, which we've translated into the catalog, so you can look things up. But there's just so much more, and it's remarkable. I mean, you know, John was writing until he died. His last poem was literally written on his deathbed, you know, just before he passed away. So protean figure, and we hope that primarily he's inspirational, and that we can keep going back to the work, and it keeps yielding more. It still speaks to people today, but we're also looking at poets today that we feel embody that same spirit, that are also, like you, involved in not just poetry, but art writing, you know, that do other things, that are writing plays, involved in film, working with playwrights and filmmakers. John worked with Guy Madden, for example. There are all sorts of other connections to other art forms and other ways of thinking. So that's a lot of what we kind of generate. And I want to say too, I found this great quote. Maybe you all know it, but it was new to me. I hope I get it right. Try to memorize it, from Mallarmé. That is the job of the poet. Does everyone know this quote? Maybe not. You all know it. Okay. It's the job of the poet to clear. This is maybe known to all poets. This is where non-poets get to discover things. It's a job of the poet to clear our, oh, I'm going to get it wrong. Our word. Oh, someone help me.
I know the one you're talking about.
Word clogged, our word clogged reality by creating spaces around things. I think I got it. And I feel like that's what we try to do here. We don't explain a poem. We offer it in a space, in a non-hierarchical, friendly, collaborative space. Thank you. It's now in the chat box. Yeah, I think I got it pretty well. Creating silences by creating silences. No, thanks. Yes. I think I was there. That we offer spaces to explore poems without being afraid of them. If you are, and if you're not, to go even deeper.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. So that's a perfect segue into the Q&A, but I just want to thank you, all three of you, for all your great comments, and you just brought it alive. I think it's really fun to feel it. And I'm going to segue over to Eleanor, who's going to curate the Q&A.
Thank you, Cole, and thank you so much, Jeffrey and Ryan and Dara. It's been so fantastic to hear from you all this afternoon. You're all so passionate, and it's just been really inspiring, so thank you. We do have a few questions today, and our first one will be from GE. So GE, if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Confirmed today for sure, and this is probably more of a comment in some ways than it is a question, but is the Flowchart Foundation as much of an index of us as it is JA?
Sure. I love the concept. And because we do so many things that involve collaborative involvement of people, with our programming, that yes, I think that's true, that everyone that takes part in, say, a close reading event or other events we do live that are similar in that sort of collaborative, non-hierarchical spirit, become part of this index that, as John said, it's on the outside looking out, but also looks deeper in, that we do both at the same time. And so everyone becomes part of this constellation that is generated out from the work of John Ashbery to all of us now, people creating, people reading. So sure, yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, GE. Our next question will be from Ty.
Hey y'all, sorry nobody can get me to shut up in the chat today. Thank you so much for talking. I was having such a great time listening to you guys. I have a really, basic, boring question, but it's the one I really wanted the answer to, which is whether each of you remember your first encounter with Ashbery. I remember mine was in a Manhattan gallery in 2017, and then I lost my mind because it introduced me to Joe Brainerd too.
I think my most important time, I can't remember exactly. Actually, the first time I met John, I was too young to be put on a panel by PEN to talk about making books whole. And it was a panel with John Ashbery, Susan Sontag, and, oh God, Richard Howard. And I was a baby. And Richard Howard generously and funnily and sweetly said to me, "You're too young to have anything to say on this panel." And that was funny and sweet. And of course, me knowing that I was not prepared, not prepared by life. I might have been prepared by curiosity and love of poetry, but not by life yet to talk. I published one book. And so I wrote something. And I wrote something beginning with quoting Gertrude Stein, and I wrote about big houses being easier to keep and all kinds of things that I had to save face, basically, in front of these people who I thought were geniuses. And that's the first time I met John in person, and that was wonderful and beautiful. And he was himself, as always, curious, kind, and so witty. Always, and so smart and knowledgeable about this work that we all do. And so that, and then I read Flowchart later and taught it many times. And that was my favorite encounter with his mind, because it's so prolonged and changes so much along the way. You wait till something happens in the narrative of that poem. It's beautiful.
And, speaking of his intelligence, I remember very, very well the first time I met him and spoke to him. I had seen him read before then, but I was working at the Poetry Society of America. Again, I was a baby a long time ago, and it was during an event that happens through the Poetry Society every year, the giving of the Frost Medal. I can't remember who was getting it, but John was in the audience, and at the mingle part after, I recognized him right away, having seen him read, and was very, very shy. And I had a volume 2 of Proust under my arm, which is important, and walked up and tried to just kind of get near to eavesdrop a little bit. And I think he had been, John was always so lovely and kind about being nice to anyone, no matter how much they kept asking questions, and he would kind of put up with it. And I think he spotted the Proust and felt a possible reprieve, and so immediately sort of drew me in and said, "Oh, you're reading Proust, where are you in it?" And then I answered, "Oh, well, M has just met Rachel," which is what had happened at that point in the book. And he said, "Oh, Rachel whence from the Lord." And those of you who know your Proust know that there's a nickname that Marcel has for Rachel, which is Rachel whence from the Lord. And what you may or may not know is that is a somewhat obscure reference, and I'm in real life an opera composer, to an opera by Elavie called La Juive that had a very popular barcarolle in it, Rachel whence from the Lord. Occasionally shows up in a program, but it's fairly obscure. And John, and I said, "Oh yes," because I had just read that. And then he launched into singing the barcarolle in French.
Yay.
Amazing. So
Wow.
I will never forget that. Yeah.
Well, I never met John Ashbery. And my first encounter with John Ashbery was I work as a bookseller as well, and I was like shelving a bunch of his books, and I tried. My friend told me I should get the collected, and I tried picking it up, and I didn't quite get into it the first time around. But I think what was fascinating to me is that I just couldn't understand it, and then they were like, my friend was like, "No, you have to let the words kind of wash over you," and I was like, "Okay, I can get into that." And then the more I encountered Jen Ashbery, it kind of is like when you see a number and you keep seeing a number throughout your day-to-day life, and you see more and more John Ashbery. So it got to the point where I was in this class on translations with Matvey and Kelevich, and he brought up Finnish rhapsody and the idea of like a hemistitch, or like a thing that can be like linked via this one line. And the Finnish rhapsody, what's so fascinating to me about that poem is that after the comma, it kind of retranslates the phrase in which the previous line was going to be talking about. And I love that poem. And that's when everything kind of clicked into place for me, that Ashbery is so much interested in as we heard today about the ephemera and the things, as much as the space between the things, like Malame was talking about, or the silences between the things. I think that like the way in which poems can move like machines or bodies, like Ashbery's strange little movements on the page, then brought in this whole new way in which I read it. And now I'm not looking to read to understand every little bit, but more of just like looking to see how the body moves on the page. And I think that's my first, like, so Finnish Rhapsody was my first like enjoyment of that.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you so much for that question, Ty. That was really, really lovely to hear. And I would like to ask you all a question, which will be our last question before we have a reading from Jeffrey. You all, obviously collaborate very much together, but all stand in sort of different positions within the Flowchart Foundation. And I would love to hear from all of you on kind of like your wildest dreams for the future of Flowchart. Yeah, interpret that as you wish.
Well, I'll say quick, for myself, I would love to walk into the Flowchart in the morning and greet the staff. Hoping many more people, but I also hope I'll say good morning to the various people working in the Ashbery Resource Center. I think that's the most immediate kind of dream for the future, to really have people using that resource as we're finally opening it up and getting a little funding to maneuver it the way we'd like it to be. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I would say my wildest dream is pretty tame. And I would say it would be that what flowchart does inspires people to do their own work and to make the art or make the research work that they love to do inspired in just the same way that I'm inspired by reading other poets and being inspired what I surround myself with and choose to be close to on a day-to-day basis.
I think my dream for the foundation, as someone who just started working, is to continue working there and to kind of expand it out to something that, as someone who does not live in Hudson, can kind of create a path and an easy access between New York and Hudson, so that there's like a way in which people can. I feel like a big barrier to entry is that people don't really know how to get there. So I'd love to make I don't know, not like an Ashbury itinerary like pamphlet to get from Penn Station to Hudson, but something like that, something that makes it very easy to show that this could be a day trip. You could easily go to the resource center for a couple of days or so, and stay there for a little bit, or even make it a day trip and like go up for a couple of performances, and that it's a lot less complicated. So I hope that eventually I can make that the case, so that more New Yorkers can come up, and also more people from the Hudson can come down and maybe see some flowchart stuff happening in New York.
Yeah, I should
Great.
add that we're an easy day trip from New York City, 2 hours on Amtrak, and you can ride a train to the Flowchart Foundation. So it's a nice day trip. Lots.
And
of
Jeffrey has ample tips about where to sit for between the Amtrak stations, if you want to see some of the cool things that come through.
Happy to send you a list of all the things to look for on your way up on the train. All 8 lighthouses, the bald eagles, where they live. I will share all of that with you if you're curious.
Sounds great. Thank you all again for just wonderful, really stimulating conversation, making us all want to get on the Amtrak and get up there.
Thank you for making this happen. To you, Eleanor. And Cole for hosting us.
Yes, thank you,
And
Brooklyn.
now we get to hear more poetry.
Yeah. So I'm going to read, we'll see how the time goes. I'm going to read a few shorter Ashbury poems and then maybe one more. And I'll say for myself, this is an effect that these poems have on me. I have a very simple test for whether art is good. And I mean to me, I don't mean in and of itself. And it's if it makes me want to make art. And so that's what these things do for me.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not a poet, it makes me want to do what I do as a creative person. Here we go. Vetiver. Ages passed slowly like a load of hay as the flowers recited their lines and pike stirred at the bottom of the pond. The pen was cool to the touch. The staircase swept upward through fragmented garlands, keeping the melancholy already distilled in letters of the alphabet. It would be time for winter now, its spun sugar palaces and also lines of care at the mouth, pink smudges on the forehead and cheeks, the color once known as ashes of roses. How many snakes and lizards shed their skins for time to be passing on like this, sinking deeper in the sand as it wound toward the conclusion? It had all been working so well, and now, well, it just kind of came apart in the hand as a change is voiced, sharp as a fishhook in the throat, and decorative tears flowed past us into a basin called infinity. There was no charge for anything. The gates had been left open intentionally. Don't follow. You can have whatever it is. And in some room, someone examines his youth, finds it dry and hollow, porous to the touch. Oh, keep me with you, unless the outdoors embraces both of us, unites us, unless the bird catchers put away their twigs, the fishermen haul in their sleek, empty nets, and others become part of the immense crowd around this bonfire, a situation that has come to mean us to us. And the crying in the leaves is saved, the last silver drops. Life as a book that has been put down. We have erased each letter and the statement still remains vaguely, like an inscription over the door of a bank with hard to figure out Roman numerals that say perhaps too much in their way. Weren't we being surrealists? And why did strangers at the bar analyze your hair and fingernails as though the body wouldn't seek and find that most comfortable position, and your head, that strange thing, become more problematic each time the door was shut? We have talked to each other, taken each thing only just so far, but in the right order, so it is music, or something close to music, telling from afar. We have only some knowledge and more than the required ambition to shape it into a fruit made of cloud that will protect us until it goes away. But the juice thereof is bitter. We have not much in our gardens, and you should go up into knowledge with this careless sarcasm and be told there for once it is not here. Only the smoke stays, and silence, and old age, that we have come to construe as a landscape somehow, and the peace that breaks all records, and singing in the land, delight that will be and does not know us. Uptick. We were sitting there and I made a joke about how it doesn't dovetail time. 1 minute running out faster than the one in front it catches up to. That way, I said, there can be no waste. Waste is virtually eliminated. To come back for a few hours to the present subject, a painting, looking like it was seen, half turning around, slightly apprehensive, but it has to pay attention to what's up ahead, a vision. Therefore, poetry dissolves in brilliant moisture and reads us to us, a faint notion, too many words, but precious. Just walking around. What name do I have for you? Certainly, there is no name for you in the sense that the stars have names that somehow fit them. Just walking around, an object of curiosity to some, but you are too preoccupied by the secret smudge in the back of your soul to say much and wander around, smiling to yourself and others. It gets to be kind of lonely, but at the same time off-putting, counterproductive, as you realize once again that the longest way is the most efficient way, the one that looped among islands, and you always seem to be traveling in a circle. And now that the end is near, the segments of the trip swing open like an orange. There is light in there, and mystery, and food. Come see it. Come not for me, but it. But if I am still there, grant that we may see each other.
Great choices.
Thank you. Light turnouts. Dear ghost, what shelter in the noonday crowd? I'm going to write an hour, then read what someone else has written. You've no mansion for this to happen in. But your adventures are like safe houses. You're knowing where to stop, an adventure of another order, like seizing the weather. We too are embroiled in this scene of happening. And when we speak the same phrase together, we used to have one of those. It matters like a shot in the dark. One of us stays behind. One of us advances on the bridge, as on a carpet. Life, it's marvelous, follows and falls behind. And to conclude, I'm going to read a short poem, given what's happening in the world today, by Mahmoud Darwish. I belong there. I belong there. I have many memories. I was born as everyone is born. I have a mother, a house with many windows, brothers, friends, and a prison cell with a chilly window. I have a wave snatched by seagulls, a panorama of my own. I have a saturated meadow. In the deep horizon of my word, I have a moon, a bird's sustenance, and an immortal olive tree. I have lived on the land long before swords turned man into prey. I belong there. When heaven mourns for her mother, I return heaven to her mother. And I cry so that a returning cloud might carry my tears. To break the rules, I have learned all the words needed for a trial by blood. I have learned and dismantled all the words in order to draw from them a single word, home. Thank you.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. That was such a perfect reading to conclude a really, really wonderful conversation. Thank you so much again, Ryan and Dara and Cole, for the lovely, lovely dialogue. Really excited to stay in the loop with Flowchart, and I hope you all do too. Thanks everyone so much for tuning in today as well. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring the NSE and for supporting our archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel and where this conversation will be posted soon. And please help keep the Rail free. We are right now fundraising $200,000 this season to directly support our writers, guest artists, production staff, and operations for the coming year. As a small nonprofit, we need your support and would really appreciate any donations of any size from the link in our chat. And please join us tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. for a conversation with Alana Harris Babu and Charlotte Kent on the event of Needy Machines at Candace Mady Gallery. We'll conclude with a poetry reading by Sissy. So please tune in for that. Note special time, 11:30 a.m. tomorrow. And thanks again so much, everyone, for tuning in. We can now turn on the microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. I hope you all enjoy the
And
rest.
thank you, Fong, as
Thank you.
always. And
Yes.
for
Thank
the
you.
Rail, thank the
Thank
Rail
you
for
so
hosting
much.
this.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Ryan.
everybody.
Thank
This
you.
was
Bye.
wonderful.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all so much.
Wonderful way to spend the afternoon. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dara.
Yay,
agree.
Thank you,
I had so much fun today.
Thank you, Cole. Long
Great.
live
Be able to hear you.
Flowchart.
Long
Yes.
live Flowchart.
Long live John Ashbury.
Thank you.
Yes.
Long
Thank
live.
you so much,
Love
everyone.
Flowchart.
Very important spiritual leader for the Rail. He was the advisory board member and came to visit whenever he could.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
thank you so much, Jeffrey, Billy, Ryan, Dara, and Cole.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Temple nurture.